So I was home alone one night back in 2009. My parents were out on their weekly date nights and I had just returned from my afternoon jog. Being a hot August day, I had worked up quite a sweat on my run. I had decided to take a cold shower and clean up a bit. My house doesn't have air conditioning and was quite stuffed up, so I decided to open a few windows to circulate the airflow within the house. I can remember opening a window in the kitchen, 2 windows across from each other in the living room, and 1 window in the basement. I knew I was going to be spending my evening down there watching movies, because it was much cooler. I had my shower, got dressed and went downstairs to make myself some dinner. I took my dinner down to the basement and flicked on Netflix. I do not recall falling asleep, but I must have passed out not long after eating my food and lying down. When I woke up, it was dark outside. The only light being cast into the basement was from the TV screen. It was now freezing in the basement and I could feel a cold breeze circulating the room from having the window open for too long. I got up, closed the windows and went upstairs. When I got upstairs, all the lights were off, indicating that my parents were still not home from their date. I cleaned the dishes, put them in the dishwasher and closed the window above the sink. Just before I went to go up to my room for the night, I remembered that the windows in the living room were still open. I walked over to close the one window by the TV, then over to the next, which was located by the front porch. I noticed that my mom's vase with fake flowers was knocked off. The table in front of the window and the flowers were sprawled out across the floor. I didn't think much of it at that time. I thought it was a strong breeze and the curtains had tipped it over. I closed the window and started picking up the flowers. As I was cleaning, I heard a squeaky sound from upstairs. I thought it was a door handle being twisted and I listened as hard as possible. Suddenly I could hear a creak in the hallway floor upstairs. I looked out to the front window to check the driveway for my parents' car, hoping it was one of them upstairs, but the driveway was empty. I quickly, but quietly put the vase and flowers down on the table and silently began walking over to the stairs to look up. As I got closer to the stairs, I heard 2 more creaks on the floor which caused me to stop dead in my tracks. I was now only a few steps from the stairs. I took those last few steps and put one hand on the railing. I peeked around the corner and only saw darkness. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to turn my phone on silent and went to the kitchen to text my dad, making sure I was close to the back door for an easy getaway. He texted me back saying, "It's an old house and is settling after a really hot day." I told him about the sound of the door handle twisting, but he just assumed there was an open window upstairs and the wind was knocking a door against the frame. I felt a huge chunk of my anxiety start to fade after talking with my dad. I decided to grab a glass of water and head on up the bed. I flicked on the lights for the stairs and started making my way up. I got to the top of the stairs and noticed that all the doors were wide open, except for mine. My parents' room and spare bedroom were on the left and my room was on the right, with the bathroom at the end of the hallway. Because it was very hot that day, it wasn't unusual for my mom to open all the doors and windows upstairs. I exhaled a sigh of relief and turned on the lights in my room. I did a quick look around and walked over to my nightstand to put my water beside my laptop, then went off to the bathroom to get ready for bed. I got into bed and was watching my favorite show on my laptop. Then out of nowhere, I heard a sound of something slowly scraping my closet door. I quickly flicked on the light beside my bed and my closet door was cracked open. Questions started racing through my head. Was it open the whole time? Was it closed when I came in? Before I could even have time to rationalize my thoughts, the closet door burst open and someone was standing in the closet. My clothes were partially covering their body and face. I looked closer and there was the most sickly, palest, dirtiest woman I have ever seen. She was wearing torn clothes and her skin was sickeningly white with cuts. She was wearing what I assume a white nightgown. Then she asked me in a quiet voice, "Have you seen my baby?" That was enough for me to grab my phone and run. As soon as I was halfway out my bedroom door, I heard her shouting and asking me to return her baby. I ran as fast as I could to the bathroom and locked the door. It was only a second later that I heard a huge crash against the door and she was demanding me to return her baby. I called the 911 and the operator assured me the police would be there as fast as they could. I jammed my feet against the door and held my back against the sink, trying my hardest to make sure the door stayed closed. With what seemed like an eternity, I heard a heavenly sound. I heard the police call out that they were entering the residence. I yelled at the top of my lungs saying that I was upstairs. All I could hear next was the officers yelling. The officers ended up pepper spraying the woman, and it took 3 of them to be able to force her to the ground. I did not come out of the bathroom until the cops assured me she was out of the house. The cops told me that she was likely on drugs, or an escaped mental patient from the next county over. My parents arrived home shortly after I gave my statements to the police, and we moved out of the house a month later. That was one night I was home alone, and sadly, I will never forget it. So by the time I had finished my middle school, my parents trusted me to be alone in the house by myself. They did this so that someone could care for our elderly dog, who needed attention and supervision 24/7. With this, my parents would sometimes go out of state on a small vacation for the weekend, leaving me in the house by myself. So one night as usual, I was home alone. It was a chilly fall evening and my parents had left early Friday morning and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. Everything had gone smoothly and I was having a good time finally getting the house to myself. When my parents left, I brought my gaming console out into the living room, along with some pillows and a blanket. Figuring my dog slept in the living room, I would sleep out there with her in case she needed me in the middle of the night. After I fed my dog, I texted my mom asking for a bit of money to order a pizza. I ordered the pizza and sat on the couch playing a shooting game until the time had passed and I heard the doorbell ring. I got up and quickly threw on my jacket and went to look through the peephole. There stood the pizza guy, a medium-height, middle-aged looking guy. He had dirty blonde hair and his eyes bagged, seeming like he hadn't slept in a year. I could smell the dirty stench of cigarettes through my door, and he had his eyes fixed on the camera doorbell with a worried look on his face. I unlocked the door and greeted him with a smile. He said, "I wasn't expecting a young girl like you." Confused on how to answer, I replied in a quiet giggle. I held out my hands to take my food, but he asked me about my age. I told him I don't answer questions like that, and I placed the pizza boxes down on the couch next to me. I reached into my pocket to hand him the tip I had planned to give him. Then he asked me if my parents were home. I replied saying they are in the other room and hoped he would just believe me. He commented about the game I was playing and said it was his favorite game. I became increasingly annoyed, but I didn't want to be rude and just slammed the door in his face. I told him to just leave and he left, taking the tip. I locked the door and anxiously watched carefully from the window to make sure he got back in his car. I didn't stop watching until he sped off around the corner. I let out a sigh of relief and did a quick sweep around the house and made sure all the windows and doors were locked. A couple of hours had passed until I decided I was going to lay down and watch TV for the night until I fell asleep. Before I noticed, I had drifted off completely, forgetting the interaction I had earlier. When I woke up, it was still dark outside and my dog was barking like crazy. I got up and stretched for a second. I looked around for a bit and didn't see anything. I was about to lay back down until I noticed it in the corner of my eye. There was a face in the window to my right. I saw the same man from earlier and he was trying to look inside. He waved and was smiling at me. I felt my blood run cold and questions started running through my head. My fight or flight triggered instantly and I ran to my room. I pulled the baseball bat out from underneath my bed and walked back to the living room where I had been sleeping. When I went back, the man had moved from the window to the front door. He was knocking gently and requested to hang out together. I warned him that I was going to call the police, but he banged on the door aggressively this time. The doorknob shook violently and my dog was going mad at that point. I took her with me into my room and dialed 911 on my phone. I was explaining what was happening, but suddenly, I heard a couple loud bangs. He was throwing himself at my front door to try to bust through it. But all of that left my mind when I heard the front door burst open and fall onto the ground of my living room. I whispered into my phone to the 911 operator that the man had broken into my house. The person on the other end of the line instructed me to stay quiet and sit tight as the police were minutes away. Before I could think of anything, my phone died and I started panicking. I quietly went over and shut my bedroom lights off and hid in my closet with my dog. I heard the man walking through my house, searching under tables, behind couches, and in hallway closets. He stopped walking for a moment and I could hear him directly outside my bedroom door. Since the door was locked, he again tried to break the door. There were a couple bangs on the door before he was able to punch a hole through my door to unlock it. I heard the lock and it gave a small clicking sound before the door creaked open. The man took a step in and stood in front of the closet. I cupped my hand over my mouth to quiet my anxious breathing. I heard him looking through my belongings, under the bed and under my desk. After searching the room, he had his hand on the closet door. I thought it was over for me, but before he had the chance to open the closet, I heard the police sirens getting closer and closer. He also heard the sirens and he ran from my bedroom. I heard the back door slide open and footsteps through the dead grass. The 911 operator must have told the police where I was and I felt like I could finally breathe again. The officer opened the closet door and told me it was okay to come out. They let me outside with my dog on a leash and I sat on the edge of the seat in the police car. I waited there as the police searched my house in case the man had still been there. The police said there were no signs of anything being stolen. He wasn't there for valuables, instead, he was looking for me. There were many signs that it had been a break-in, so the case stayed open for a while, but it was eventually closed. The guy was never found and it wasn't known where he was. His identity was found and this man had past warrants for home invasions and failure to appear in court. The fact that he was never caught and he is still out there somewhere shakes me to my core. But I know for sure I'm never ever opening the door for anybody ever again when I'm home alone. When I was about 14 years old, I often had opportunities to stay home alone. My mother and father were forced to travel because their parents were ill and lived overseas. My older siblings wouldn't get off work until at least an hour after I finished school, and I was used to being home alone. One Saturday when I was 12, my parents had to go to a funeral for an old friend in the next city. My brother had already moved out by then, and my sister used to spend very less time at home. Being home alone for a whole day meant I could blast music and spend as much time as I wanted on the computer. When my brother moved out, we converted his bedroom into an office, and my computer was in there. We still had dial-up internet at the time, so my parents added an extra phone line in the house. I ran into the office to use the phone to call my friend and ask her to hang out. She told me she was having boyfriend problems and needed someone to talk to and I was the best option. I ran out of the office so that I could go check out what was in the kitchen. That's when I saw her. A pale woman dressed all in black, with a black bun on her head. I couldn't really see her eyes, but for some reason, I remember thinking that she was smiling. I got some serious chills and felt instantly frozen. I thought I was being paranoid from being alone all day and ran down the stairs. I couldn't believe my imagination was playing tricks on itself like that. I called my friend to see if she had left yet, and since no one answered the phone at her house, I figured she had. Something still didn't feel right, so I put on my jacket and headed out to the driveway to wait for her. She arrived and we went inside. Since both her boyfriend and I had webcams, we went into my computer room upstairs to call him. While my friend was on the phone, she noticed something on the hallway. She ended the call and looked at me with a wide eye. She told me that there was a woman in the hallway wearing a black dress. I got up from my computer chair and we both freaked out and rushed down the stairs. I called my parents and told them that I was going to my friend's house, but they told me they were a few minutes away and insisted that I do not leave the house. When they got home, I told them what happened, but they didn't believe me. For the next few days, I kept thinking I was seeing her. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination or she was real. Weird things started happening, like the calendar in my bedroom would be upside down, things would go missing from my room. Eventually, these weird occurrences stopped. A couple of months later, we adopted a 2-year-old dog. From the moment she was brought home, she had 3 or 4 random corners of the house that she barked at. After barking at the corner, she used to run away as fast as she could, like someone was chasing her. Fortunately, we moved away from the house because my parents also felt that there is something in that house. It has been 10 years since that incident and I still want to know the mystery behind that house.